Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the NorthFormPodcast. I am your host, and I am excited to welcome you to this podcast, 3rd edition. I've got some things to talk about, a lot going on in the pipeline. A great year will ensue, I assure you. All right, so I wanted to cover the 4 types of thinking today. Stay tuned for a visual representation of that. I got some dry erase markers and eraser finally that I'm ready to start showing you on the whiteboard for some more visuals for those of you who are more visually oriented. I personally am very orally, that's ears, oriented. So there's 4 types of thinking, and there is linear thinking, which is very common among academics and taught in school. And then there is dichotomous thinking, and there is lateral thinking, and then ternary thinking. Now, what most people get stuck in is the linear and the dichotomous. So you can think of it as a quadrant, which is what I'm going to show you on the whiteboard in another lesson. And the linear thinking it's a line, right? So one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, and an unbroken chain of events. Dichotomous thinking is similar. It's if it's either this, then if it's not this, then it's that. It's either this or that. Okay? That's dichotomous thinking. Now, what you want to move toward as an idealized individual or as a self-actualized individual, as Abraham Maslow called it, we need you to move more toward the lateral thinking, which, as opposed to a single straight line, lateral thinking is thinking on a horizontal level, and there is a multitude of different connections branching out. So that lateral thinking is what's going to help you generate ideas. That's brainstorming. That's connecting disparate ideas and concepts together. So that's lateral thinking. So you want to move from the linear, direct causal relationships to the multilateral, indirect, and horizontal relationships. Okay, now I didn't mention the 4th type of thinking. Let me make sure. Yeah. Which is, so the other one is dichotomous thinking. Dichotomy is, again, to reiterate, it's either this or it's that. It's one or the other. There's also ternary thinking. So if you want to get out of dichotomous thinking, which is also a type of trap, for now we'll call it the dichotomous fallacy, the falsehood that everything is either one or the other, no in between, right? Which we know not to be true. Ternary thinking is that there's always a third alternative. There's always some middle ground to be found. And alternatively, ternary thinking says that there's also an unseen third option that is neither one or the other of those dual choices that you have. Okay, next up I'm going to be reading from you. This is part of the audiobook edition from a book called The Katana Mindset. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Last time the audio quality was quite good. And I am going to read you the introduction. The morning air was crisp, the kind of brisk chill that nudges you awake as you pedal through it. I was on my way to pick up groceries and taking the same route I'd cycled countless times before. The streets were calm, dotted with early risers, bustling about their routines. I had just approached the crosswalk when it happened. It was cinematic, a blur of motion and screeching tires. It was more surreal, the kind of slow motion disaster where reality bends and the world narrows to a single moment. I remember the thud of metal against my bike and the sensation of my body being flung sideways as if gravity itself had betrayed me. My helmet cracked against the pavement, a jarring sound that seemed to echo forever. And then silence, broken only by the faint hum of a car engine and the hurried voices of strangers rushing to help. Pain swiftly followed, sharp and electric, radiating through my lower back and legs. I tried to move, but my body refused, as if pinned under the weight of an invisible force. A passerby knelt beside me, her voice calm but urgent. "Daijoubu desu ka?" she asked. "Are you okay?" I couldn't answer. Words felt slippery, unreachable in the haze of pain and confusion. The ambulance ride was a blur. Sirens wailed faintly in the background as paramedics worked efficiently, their faces focused but calm. I remember looking at the ceiling of the vehicle, counting the fluorescent lights above me, trying to anchor myself to something, anything. At the hospital, the diagnosis hit like a second collision. Severe spinal fractures, herniated discs, and a recovery that would be measured not in weeks but in months. The doctor said, "You're lucky." Though I didn't feel like that. I was alive, yeah, but the road ahead seemed impossibly long. Confined to the hospital bed, the world shrank to a sterile room with pale walls and the rhythmic beeping of machines. Days stretched into nights without distinction, a monotony that dulled even the edges of pain. At first, I tried to focus on small victories, wiggling my toes, sitting up for a few minutes, but the enormity of what I had lost overshadowed them. I couldn't walk, I couldn't work, I couldn't even cycle, which had always been my sanctuary. Despair crept in like a shadow, slow but unrelenting. The physical pain was a constant hum, but the emotional weight was crushing. I felt like a prisoner in my own body, a spectator to my life rather than a participant. Memories of freedom, the wind on my face as I cycled, the ease of moving without thought, became bittersweet taunts. Worst of all was the fear of stagnation. Before the accident, I'd always been in motion, chasing goals, solving problems, moving forward. Now, forward felt impossible. Each day was a battle against the creeping thought that this was my new normal, that I might never reclaim the life I once had. There were moments of light, though faint and fleeting. The hospital staff moved with a kind of quiet efficiency that fascinated me, though. Their demeanor was steady, almost serene, even under pressure. I began to notice their small acts of care, a nurse adjusting my blanket without being asked, a doctor explaining my condition with patience and empathy. These gestures stood in stark contrast to the chaos swirling in my mind, offering glimpses of stability. As the weeks dragged on, I started to reflect, not by choice but by necessity. I immobilized and I was isolated, and there was little else to do. Questions surfaced and unhidden. They were relentless. What did it mean to be strong, to endure, to rebuild? I didn't have answers, but the questions themselves felt like a lifeline, a tether to something larger than the pain. And recovery was not linear. Progress came in frustratingly small increments, each step forward met with setbacks. Learning to sit up without assistance felt monumental, but the effort left me exhausted and sore for days. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, each exercise a painful reminder of my limitations. Yet, amidst the struggle, I thought that something would take root, maybe strength. It wasn't about avoiding hardship. Maybe it was about facing hardship. Maybe it was about finding stability, even when the ground beneath you was shifting. It was during one of these restless nights, staring at the ceiling and feeling the weight of it all, that I first thought about transformation, not as a destination, but a process. It was a nebulous idea. It was unformed, but it offered a flicker of hope. Perhaps this wasn't the end, but the beginning of something new. A chance to forge a version of myself, shaped by adversity, rather than broken by it. Little did I know that this thought would lead me to a swordsmith in Tsukuba, a man whose craft would teach me lessons far beyond the metal and fire. But that moment, in the quiet stillness of a hospital room, all I could do was breathe and wait, hoping that the act of enduring was, in itself, enough to start again. The hospital as a turning point. Life in the hospital felt both static and transformative, a paradox I would not come to appreciate until much later. At first, I thought it was a place where time stood still, a world removed from the bustle of daily life, suspended in fluorescent lights and the soft hum of machines. But beneath that stillness, I began to notice an intricate rhythm, a quiet choreography in the way of the staff, moving and speaking and caring for their patients. Each morning, It began the same way. A crisp swish of curtains being drawn, the mutter, the muted clatter of trays, the polite but firm voice of the nurse announcing her arrival. Her movements were precise, her tone calm but never cold. "Ohayou gozaimasu," she would say, her eyes meeting mine with a brief but genuine smile. It struck me how deliberate everything was. No wasted emotions, no rushed explanations, even as she tended to my injuries. Painful work that required pressing and stretching muscles that felt like fire. There was a steady rhythm to her care that put me, though, at ease. I remember one particular nurse, Matsuda-san. She was a small woman in her 50s, and her hair neatly tied back, her demeanor quiet but unshakably confident. She had a way of speaking that softened even the harshest truths. One day, as she helped me practice sitting upright, she noticed my frustration. My body felt heavy, unwieldy, and the smallest effort left me breathless. I must have let out a groan of defeat because she paused, resting her hand lightly on my shoulder. "Yukuri, yukuri," she said softly, slowly. It wasn't just the words, but the way she said them, with a patience that seemed infinite. There was no urgency, no expectation that I should be doing more or better. Instead, she seemed to understand that the process was enough, that the act of trying, however imperfect, was progress in itself. That moment stayed with me. I began to notice how this ethos, this sense of patience and quiet persistence permeated the hospital. The staff never seemed hurried, even though I knew that they were busy. There was an underlying trust in the process, a belief that healing couldn't be rushed. It was so different from what I was used to, where efficiency often trumped empathy. Efficiency trumped empathy, the world I was used to, and progress was measured in milestones rather than effort. Visitors, too, left an impression. In Japan, the hospital visits are often brief but deeply intentional. Friends or family would arrive with small, thoughtful gifts: fruit, neatly wrapped, a thermos of tea, a handwritten note. They would bow politely, exchange a few warm words, and leave without lingering too long, as if understanding that rest was as important as company. One day, an elderly man visited the patient in the bed next to mine. He must have been in his 70s, his back slightly stooped with his movements deliberate. He placed a small vase of fresh flowers on the bedside table, adjusting it until it was just so. Then he sat, hands folded neatly on his lap, speaking in a low, steady voice. He didn't stay long, perhaps 15 minutes, but in that short time he conveyed a depth of care that was unmistakable. It was in his tone, his posture, the way he placed the flowers, as if they carried a message of their own. Watching him, I felt a pang of longing, not for flowers or visitors, I had my share of both, but for the kind of quiet strength that he embodied. It was as if he carried the weight of life's challenges not with resistance, but with grace, bending without breaking. These moments sparked something in me. At first, it was just a flicker of curiosity. How did they do it? How did they move through difficulty with such steadiness, such quiet resolve? I began to see parallels between the hospital environment and the Japanese culture I had observed more broadly. There was a kind of resilience here, not flashy or dramatic, but deeply rooted. It wasn't about avoiding struggle, but about facing it with composure, finding balance in the midst of chaos. In those early days, as I lay immobilized and grappling with my own frustrations, these observations planted seeds of reflection. The structured care, the deliberate kindness, the unspoken trust in the healing process, all of it challenged my assumptions about strength and progress. Perhaps the most profound realization was this: stability wasn't the absence of hardship, but the ability to endure it with grace. It wasn't about being unshaken, but about finding your footing again and again, no matter how many times the ground shifts beneath you. Looking back, I can see how these early days in the hospital became a turning point. They forced me to confront my own restlessness, my need for control, and my fear of stillness. And they introduced me to the idea that would shape the rest of my journey, that transformation begins not in moments of triumph, but in the quiet, often painful spaces where we're forced to pause and reflect. On meeting Kenji Tanaka, the swordsmith, as a mentor. My first meeting with Kenji Tanaka was not planned, at least not by me. It was a suggestion from Matsudan, my nurse, who had become an unofficial guide, to my slow recovery. One afternoon, as she adjusted my pillow with her trademark precision, she casually mentioned a family friend who forged katanas. "It might be good for you to see," she said. "He believes the forging process is much like healing. Maybe It will help you understand your own healing process. At first I was skeptical, but what could swords possibly teach me about recovery, I said. But the thought did linger, nudging at my curiosity. Matsuda-san arranged the visit, and a few weeks later I could manage short walks with a cane, and I found myself on a train to Tsukuba. Kenji's workshop was nestled on the edge of town, surrounded by trees that swayed gently in the late autumn breeze. The building itself was modest, almost understated, with a wooden sign at the entrance bearing his family name in an elegant kanji. Inside, the air was warm and heavy with the faint tang of iron and ash. Genji Tanaka greeted me with a small bow, his hands rough but steady, the hands of a craftsman. He was 69, but moved with a deliberate grace, his posture upright, his eyes sharp. His demeanor was calm, almost meditative, as if every gesture was intentional. "You are the friend of Matsuda-san spoke of," he said, his voice low and even. "Welcome." Kenji was the fourth-generation swordsmith in his family, a legacy that began in the late Edo period. His tools, hammers, anvils, and furnaces had been passed down for decades, their surfaces worn smooth by the hands of his ancestors. But Kenji's story extended far beyond the workshop. In the 1980s, during Japan's economic boom, Kenji had left Tsukuba to study metallurgy in the United Kingdom. He became a professor at a prestigious university, where he spent years teaching the science of metal to eager students. Yet, even as he built a career abroad, he felt a pull toward home. The art of katana forging was dying out, and Kenji knew that if he didn't return, his family's tradition might fade into obscurity. "I realized that knowledge without roots is like a blade without a hilt," he told me, strong but unanchored. His time in the UK had given him a unique perspective. He understood the katana not only as an artifact of tradition, but also as a marvel of engineering. The folding of the steel, the careful tempering, the balance between hardness and flexibility, it all had parallels to human resilience. When we first met, I had expected Kenji to be a figure steeped entirely in old world tradition, someone who might dismiss modernity as an intrusion. Instead, I found a man who bridged worlds. He spoke with equal reverence for the ancient techniques of his craft and the scientific principles that underpinned them. As we sat in the workshop, surrounded by tools that looked both ancient and timeless, Kenji began to explain the process of forging a katana. "The steel is heated until it glows," he said, gesturing to the furnace. "Then it is folded, it is hammered and folded again, sometimes thousands of times. This removes impurities and aligns the structure of the metal. It's a process of refinement, not like life itself." He reached for a half-finished blade resting on the anvil. "But the folding is not enough. The blade must also be tempered, quenched in water to harden it, and then polished. Each step shapes the steel, making it stronger and more resilient." As he spoke, I found myself captivated not just by the process, but by the way Kenji described it. There's a quiet poetry in his words, a sense that this ancient craft had held lessons far beyond the workshop. "It's not the fire that destroys the steel," he said, "but the fire that transforms it." I watched as he carefully examined the blade in his hands, tilting it to catch the light. "Life is the same. We all face heat and pressure, challenges that test us, but these challenges can also shape us if we let them." That conversation stayed with me a long time after his workshop. Kenji's words felt like a key, unlocking a way of thinking about my own struggles. My accident, the months in the hospital, the slow, frustrating process of recovery, all of it began to take on a new meaning. I started to see my challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities for transformation, much like the steel that passed through Kenji's forge. Over the following weeks, I visited Kenji several more times, each visit revealing new layers of his craft and philosophy. He spoke of balance, the need for the blade to be both hard enough to cut and flexible enough to withstand impact. He explained how even imperfections in the steel could be worked into the design, becoming part of the blade's unique character. "Perfection is not the goal," he told me once. "The goal is harmony. A blade must have balance, just as a person must find balance in life." Kenji's insights became the framework for this book, the 6 stages I describe herein: stability, acceptance, reflection, improvement, compassion, and purpose are all rooted in the lessons I learned from him. They mirror the stages of forging a katana, each one building on the last, creating a foundation for growth and resilience. Genji Tanaka was more than a craftsman. He was a teacher, a guide, and a living embodiment of the principles he shared. His workshop became a space of learning and reflection, a place where I began to see my own journey through a different lens. Looking back, I realized meeting Kenji was not just a turning point in my recovery, but a catalyst for transformation. Through his words and his work, he helped me understand that life, like the forging of a katana, is a process, a series of trials that shape us into something stronger, sharper, and more resilient. Next up, we'll be discovering the 6 stages through Japanese encounters. All right, so that's the audiobook reading. That is the Katana Mindset, the introduction. So now we are moving toward a few side-ins here. So a lot of people criticize technology. They criticize social media. They criticize the new generation, you name it. And specifically technology. Technology has always been lambasted. Technology has always been criticized because it's new, it's different, it's uncertain. Okay? Even Plato, the history of Western civilization is a series of footnotes to Socrates, it is often said. But Socrates' student, Plato, even said that he believed that the invention of writing was a corruptive technology because it would atrophy the human memory. So, obviously that hasn't been the case. And people are also saying that about technology today, right? Nobody can remember anything anymore. Digital dementia, oh my God. I call that chickens with their heads cut off syndrome. Everybody's running around like in that movie Chicken Little. The sky is falling, oh my God. You gotta freak out. Don't forget to buy my product. That'll help you. Right, nothing wrong with that. But just remember that people are always going to criticize new things, especially technology. So the technology itself is inherently neutral, isn't it? So use technology to your advantage. It's about how you use it. It's not about the tool itself. Any tool, a katana, for example, apropos to the audiobook, is an instrument. It's an instrument. It's about how you use it. You can use the instrument to commit homicide or suicide, or you can kill someone that's about to kill you. Right? So it's all about the way that you use the technology. It's not, the technology is always neutral. All right, so next up is a protocol for better living. So what I want you to do is I want you to find flow. If you need to look this up, go to theflowresearchcollective.com or type in Stephen Kotler into YouTube. Flow is the most addictive human state. It's more addictive than any drug. So I want you to find and prioritize flow above all else. And for this, you use your aesthetic sensibility, right? It said that the purpose of education is to honor and recognize beauty and to find and seek truth. So find and prioritize flow above all using aesthetic sensibilities and moderate arousal. You can use power words, priming, verbs, action verbs, power word primings, and dual task rather than constantly switching between tasks. Nothing necessarily wrong with it, but optimally engage your brain such that there's enough inflows of information such that you can focus effectively, right? Because people expect you to monotask. Don't do anything else. No, that's not correct. To find flow, you need optimal arousal, which means that if you're under aroused, you're going to get bored and tired. If you're over aroused, you're going to be stressed out and anxious. You need a balance of arousal. Okay, so here's an example of a priming phrase. So you wake up in the morning and the first thing you say to yourself is, today I'm joyful, I'm passionate, I'm curious, and I'm engaged. I'm finding all these typos in the C++ document. It's funny. I didn't notice them the first round through. I'm assertive. I'm engaged. I'm joyfully passionate, and I'm curious. There you go. Just some words. Come up with a couple words, even if it's just one word each day. Love. Love. What is love? Everybody gets all confused about love. What is love? Unconditional positive regard. That's what love is. Positive regard. Unconditionally. And I'll leave it up to you to determine how many people that think that they're in love and that they're professing love and they're acting like it's love, and it's not unconditional positive regard. It's not love. It's not love. In fact, many times I think our conception of love is closer to hatred. Moving on. Effort. Okay, this is my own. I coined this phrase. If it's apropos to the katana mindset again. Effort eventually turns misery into mastery. Dedicated effort eventually turns misery into mastery. I want you to train yourself to live in a way that negative energy, the sign of negative energy, doesn't affect you. Negative energy literally doesn't have permission to affect you. Right? So you don't get to complain about that negative energy. I was affected by that negative energy. Nope. You've decided that nothing has your permission. Nothing has the permission to get you out of whack. Nothing has the permission to affect you negatively. You never allow another person to determine your state. Nothing gets you flustered unless you give it permission to. All right, another protocol for your workflow is insert novelty. That could be a YouTube video you've never seen. It could be a new audiobook you've never heard. It could be a new song, random song selection that you've never heard. When you insert novelty into your workflow, it primes greater focus. This is a well-established fact. Yet, how many people do that? And in fact, how many people are discouraged from doing that? How many people are told that's a distraction? Okay? Novelty is necessary. All right, continuing. Moving on to memory. We're getting more intellectual here. Memory is not static. Right? Memory is a skill. Memory is a skill that you practice. Same thing with mental math, right? I can calculate a change back due, okay? Oh, you're so talented at math. No, not at all. I just practiced mental math, that's it. I put some effort into it, and there was a little bit of initial misery, but then I became relatively a master. That's mental math. Just look up mental math compliments. What are compliments? I don't mean like, oh, you're so smart, or oh, you look so good in that blouse. No, I mean compliments, complementary numbers. All right, so memory is not memory is not static. It is a skill that you practice. All right, so now I'm going to give you an initiation. This is a Kriya. This is an internal action, internally generated spiritual practice. So here's your Kriya, should you choose to initiate yourself into it. For the next 3 days, here's what I want you to do. I want you to act as if there's a bug in your ear. Now, this bug inside your ear is constantly and instantaneously telling you what to do based on the harmony of you and your environment. So for the next 3 days, I want you to treat every moment as if there's a bug in your ear and it tells you what to do. Almost linguistically, or it could be visually, or it could be kinesthetically, space-wise, and it's based in the harmony of everything, the totality of what's occurring around you and within you. As within, so without. The external world is reflected inside your internal state and vice versa. So your Kriya, that means internal action, you're going to act for the next 3 days as if there's a bug in your ear that's telling you what to do based on the harmony of your environment. Now you can use linguistic impetus. That's an initiative action, something that starts something. And I call this arodolia. This is a pareidolia, which is a visual meaning that you're getting out of something, even though there might not be anything there. And this is arodolia. So you hear the sounds, the music, as was speaking of the katana mindset, or a song without words, or the type of music, the rhythmic music in your environment, and you're imputing sounds into that. That's called arodolia. Actually, I'm going to call it audiodolia. Audiodolia. That's, you're hearing meaning, you're hearing words when they're not there. They've studied this pretty extensively. If you want to look it up, look up audio illusions. It's really, really fascinating stuff. But you can use that to your advantage, right? So you can use these features. There's this is the bug of the mind. If it's a bug, maybe it's a feature. Once again, back to dichotomous thinking, right? It's not it's a bug or it's a feature. It's actually a bug and a feature. It's how you use it. And it's how you frame it. So the better frames will win. I hope you're enjoying this frame. If so, leave a like and subscribe. Memory is not a static skill. Don't forget, it's something that you practice. Have you practiced memory? Have you found a way to practice memory with joy and interest and curiosity? Because otherwise, you probably won't maintain your memory practice. All right, I gave you the Kriya, audiodolia, imputing the bug in your ear to tell you what to do instantly. By the way, it reduces decision fatigue, or what's called ego deflation, which is the drain on your energy by having to make decisions, right? Every time you have to make a decision and you have to think through it, that drains your energy, for sure. So your willpower is, in that respect, not an unlimited resource. All right, so here's a little triplet for you here. Okay, this is also going to help your workflow. All right, what I want you to do, this is also kind of another Kriya for you to try. I want you to worry before you need to worry so that you don't have to worry. All right. So you're not worried right now? You got a problem. I want you to worry. Worry now. Some people schedule their worrying. I think that's a good idea. I don't worry enough to schedule my worrying. Maybe I should. I'm going to try that, actually. I'll get back to you on that. I'm going to schedule it for 11 a.m. tomorrow. Let's do it. Let's see how this works. So I want you to worry before you need to worry so that you don't have to worry, right? So if you have nothing to worry about, then really you should be worried because something's going to happen. Worry before you need to worry so you don't have to worry. All right. Next is something that the absolutely fantastic Chase Hughes talks about. I've talked about him, I believe, once on this channel. FTRT, I coined this term. It's called free tension release therapy. So you sit and you bring your state into a relaxed state with whatever tools you need, getting into a quiet, perhaps dark environment, headphones, some soft music playing in the background, binaural beats or isochronic tones are also really good for that. Brain FM is a good way, if you've never tried it, to experience the different brainwave states, because we do have distinct brainwave states in our brain, and we'll go over that another time. And so this free tension release, FTRT. So what's going to happen is you want to let your body release whatever tension it's feeling, and it's going to almost look like you're having little mini seizures here and there. And what that does is that frees up the electrostatic energy and the pent-up emotions and struggles that your body is having, because we know that everything is psychosomatic. It's based on interactions between the brain and the body, the brain and the heart. There's more efferent neurons from the heart to the brain than there's from the brain to the heart, meaning there's more information going from the heart to the brain than there is from the brain to the heart. So that's saying your body is very important. So free tension release therapy. Try it. You might have to do some research on it to understand how it works. All right. And this one I also coined. It's called the confabulator's paradox. So what is the confabulator's paradox? Okay. So confabulations appear true as any other truth, save for a lack of established record. So the question is, what's the difference between a truth agreed upon and a useful truth. This is called the confabulator's paradox, is that a confabulated truth, not based in quote-unquote established truth, appears just as true as any other truth. That's the confabulator's paradox. All right. Coming to a close now. What are we at? We're at 35 minutes. Okay. This one I had during one of these FTRT sessions. What takes longer to instantiate takes longer to degrade. What takes longer to instantiate takes longer to degrade. So I'm using a lot of fancy words here. Instantiate means to make an instance of, to create, to solidify something. What takes longer to create, to solidify, to instantiate, takes longer to degrade, takes longer to degrade itself, takes longer to deteriorate, right? So it's essentially the antithesis of that saying you've probably heard, use it or lose it, right? Use it or lose it, okay? This is saying, no, not so fast. No. If it's deeply instantiated, you're not going to forget that. You're not soon going to forget how to ride a bike. You're not soon going to forget how to sign your name. You're not soon going to forget how to drive your car. You're not soon going to forget how to walk. Because those things are deeply, deeply, deeply instantiated. All right. 2 left. Looks like I had about 30 here. Okay. This is just to let you reduce the burden of thought. So I just want to say this very plainly to you. What you think is most often not true. 'Tis not true what most often you think. So whatever you're thinking is the way it's going to go, it's probably not the way it's going to go. Okay? So just lessen your thought. Just try thinking less. I'm sure someday I'll get a lot of flack for that. Telling people to think less. Oh, they already don't think enough. What are you thinking? All right, and the last one. This is a little mantra that you can tell yourself. This is psychosomatic. This is NLP, not what computers use, natural language processing. Very similar vein, though. It's called neurolinguistic programming. Established science for, half century now. About 50 years. And I want you to tell yourself this, whatever happens in your day, in your life, especially if it's something big, something dramatic or traumatic. Quote, if it happened to me, it must have been meant to be. If it happened to me, it must have been meant to be. All right. That is all, folks. It was a pleasure to be with you. Hopefully you got some benefit. If you did, engage with me on Twitter, or X, I should say, or YouTube. And I will see you next time. 3rd episode of the North Forum Podcast, signing out. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.